You said to me, your therapist, and half smiling, I've done 3 sessions now, and I thought I'd feel, well, different by now. And you weren't angry, you weren't disappointed, you were genuinely puzzled, as if you'd followed the instruction and the machine just hadn't updated. I remember noticing my shoulders drop when you said it, and that was not because that it was wrong, but because I hear it so often it's almost endearing. Almost. There's a moment like that in many therapies. A soft collision between expectation and biology. No drama, no crisis, just a quiet realization that something agent hasn't budged yet. Your nervous system didn't arrive with your calendar. It didn't download itself when you turned 18. And it wasn't installed by your parents, your school, or by that self-help book you read last summer on the beach. It's old. It's embarrassingly old. Older than language, older than logic, and much, much more older than your reasons. And when I say old, I don't mean poetic. I mean stubborn. I mean built for survival in a Jurassic world where hesitation got you eaten and reflection came later, if at all. And you're sitting across from me in a heated room, safe chair, decent tea beforehand, asking me why 2 sessions and a bit of self-help haven't rewired that. So sometimes I laugh at that point. Not at you, at the gap between what we expect and what we're working with. Humor is often the only respectful response to that mismatch, in my eyes. You see, the part of you that panics, freezes, overthinks, shuts down, overreacts, or goes numb, that part doesn't care how articulate you are. It doesn't care how much insight you've gathered. It doesn't care that you finally understand why you're like this. Understanding is a very recent invention for us human beings. Your nervous system is not impressed by insight. It's impressed by repetition, by timing, by whether something happens once or keeps happening long enough to be trusted. And that's where things usually get uncomfortable in the room. Because this is the point where the fantasy quietly dies. The fantasy that if you just find the right explanation, the right technique, the right method, the right therapist, the right worksheet, something will finally click and the whole thing just will loosen up like Harry Potter magic. And I've watched people cling to that fantasy with impressive determination. They don't say it out loud. They say things like, I've already done a lot of work, or I'm very self-aware, or I've read about this a lot. And that's all true, and often completely irrelevant. Awareness is not adaptation. Your system adapts when it experiences something different so often enough that it no longer has to stay alert. It is at that moment that our mental rewiring starts. And often enough is the part nobody likes. Because often enough doesn't fit neatly into a treatment plan or a book chapter. It doesn't give you a before and after story you can post somewhere. And it looks boring from the outside, repetitive, and totally unspectacular. And from the inside, it feels slow, sometimes pointless, and sometimes irritating. And that's usually when someone asks me, slightly joking, slightly not, so how long does this take? And I will always hesitate before answering, not because I don't know anything, but because I know too much to lie politely. Your system has been practicing its current responses for decades. Some of them since you were very small. They were reinforced by real experiences, not ideas. They worked well enough to keep you functioning and in your survival mode. And now you want them to stand down because you've decided it's time by the click of your finger. But that's not how age works. That is not how learning works. And it is definitely not how your system, your nervous system, your mental system works. And this is where our self-help culture has done quite some damage. Not loudly and not maliciously, but just very persistently. Our self-help culture has sold the idea that change is mainly a matter of information, overload of information, that if you collect enough correct explanations, your inner machinery will eventually comply and tone down. So people come into therapy here with me with impressive libraries in their heads and a kind of hidden impatience in their bodies. They don't say they're impatient. They will say to me they're motivated. But motivation is not what your nervous system and mental system needs. Your mental system needs safety without performance, consistency without pressure, contact that doesn't disappear the moment things stabilize. And that's not exciting. It doesn't photograph well, and it makes no fun selfies. It does, however, work. Slowly, unevenly, and often in ways you only notice later, when something that used to raise its head simply doesn't anymore. I've had clients look at me months in and say, almost surprised, I, I would have spiraled down to hell here before on this subject. And that's usually followed by their silence, not triumph, just a kind of quiet recalibration. Those moments don't come from breakthroughs, they come from staying in the game, from letting something older than you realize that it is not no longer alone. And this is where therapy disappoints people who are secretly looking for acceleration, for optimization, for a faster version of themselves who finally gets it right and preferably as a takeaway meal. Now, if that is your project, I'm sorry to say I'm not very useful for you. I don't work with your systems by bullying them into compliance, bombarding them with techniques at the wrong timing or just much too early. I work by outlasting your system's suspicion. And yes, that means that there are weeks where nothing dramatic happens, where you show up, we talk, something small shifts, we do the work, and your mental system notes it without comment. That's not stagnation, that is registration. Your nervous system doesn't announce progress. It just gradually stops sounding alarms it no longer needs. So when people quit too early, it's rarely because nothing was happening. It's because nothing spectacular was happening yet. But our ancient Jurassic neural and mental systems don't do spectacle. They do reliability. So when you sit there, wondering why you're not fixed after a handful of sessions and a few well-chosen books, you are not failing. You are just bumping into something much, much, much older than your expectations. Something that doesn't rush because it never had to rush. And we can work on that. but only if you're willing to stop negotiating with time. Only if you're willing to let something ancient learn at its own pace. That this moment is different from the ones that taught it to stay on guard. And that's not quick. That is real. And it doesn't announce itself when it starts.